6 weeks before the assassination, Oswald had taken a low-paid job as an order filler at the Buell Book Depository in downtown Dallas. Because of his impoverished circumstances, Oswald was living in the modest residential district of Oak Cliff, 4 miles out of town. Although married with 2 young daughters, weeknights were spent alone at this seedy rooming house at 1026 North Beckley, where Oswald had mysteriously registered under the name of O.H. Lee. Most weekends, however, he visited his Russian-born wife Marina and their baby daughters, who lived on the far side of town in the Irving district of Dallas. Unable to drive, he would hitch a lift with a fellow worker to this house, where his family lodged with the woman who had befriended them, a Quaker called Ruth Paine.
The idea of his having shot the president skews what everyone thinks, it seems to me, and we forget how ordinary he was, or how he would play with his children and with mine at the house on weekends. And my main memory of him is of his watching the football games on Saturday and Sunday, and he enjoyed watching the games on the TV set. He seemed concerned about his little girls, very much so.
Oswald loved being the family man. The colleague who drove him out to see them at weekends and lived only a few doors away witnessed that affection firsthand. Buell Wesley Frazier.
He liked children very much. That's one of the things that I could get Lee to talk about. When Lee came home with me on Friday afternoon and rode back with me on Monday morning, I never saw him or did anything with him at that time, but evidently the children in the neighborhood, all of them at one time or other, seemed to find their way up to the Paine house where Lee lived to play with him and his daughter. On November the 21st, I was working at the Texas School Book Depository. Oswald came up to me and he asked if he could ride home with me, and I said, sure. And then a little bit later, I realized it wasn't Friday. And the next time I saw him, I said, well, today's not Friday, Lee. And he says, I know that. He says, it's Thursday. He says, Marina has made some curtains for me, and they have some curtain rods out there. And he says, I'm going to get the curtain rods to put the curtains up in my apartment. I said, okay.
He had never come out without asking permission before, besides the fact that it was a weeknight. And he arrived, actually, I was out of the house when he arrived. I was grocery shopping. We bought a lot of groceries. And then he was there already playing with his children on the front lawn when I arrived about 5:30. As we went by each other, I said, very, very, very happy in Russian, our president is coming. And he just sort of brushed on by without saying anything or no really reaction, and in a way that was typical of him, so I gave it very little thought. He often didn't respond very much, but I think that evening he was especially quiet at dinner, and he went to bed very early.
On the morning of the assassination, Oswald overslept. Leaving money and his wedding ring behind, he hurried down the street to secure his ride to work with Frazier. Under his arm, he carried a brown paper package. Did this contain the gun that killed the President of the United States?
The first time I saw the package, it was on the back seat of my car, and I just glanced at it. And I said, what's that, Lee? And he said, that's curtain rods. He said, remember I was going to bring them? The length of the package that I saw that morning was roughly 2 foot long, give or take an inch or two. And it was made out of the same type of packing material that you would find in any a company that packed materials for shipment. It's just the brown paper and the tape that you normally find. Nothing unusual. What we actually talked about that morning was that I said, President Kennedy is going to be coming to town today, and I said, I never seen a president. I said, I sure would like to get a chance to see him up close. But at that time, I didn't know that the motorcade in which he would be riding would come right by where we worked. He did not make any comment at all about where the president was coming to town. It didn't seem to interest him one way or the other. I parked in the parking lot at Texas School Book Depository. Lee got out of the car, took the package that he said contained curtain rods, and he put one end of the package in the cup of his hand and the other up under his armpit. He put the package under his arm that way, and he walked off toward Texas School Book Depository up on Elm Street.
The package could not have contained Oswald's rifle, for even when dismantled, it was 3 feet long. The Warren Commissioners, who investigated the assassination, ignored Frazier's unswerving testimony, insisting the weapon had been smuggled into the depository in Oswald's brown paper parcel.
What I remember is being told that it was an oral report rather than a visual one, that the president had been shot. And then it was really quite a while later that we heard that he had died. And when I first heard that he'd been shot, I went and got a little votive candle and lit that. And Marina said, "Is that a way of praying?" And I said, "Yes, it's just sort of my way." We were both just very distressed, and let lunch sit on the table, neither interested in eating. As we followed the coverage, a little later on, life went on. We had children to take care of, and she was hanging out some laundry in the back line when I heard on the TV that the shots were thought to have been fired from the School Book Depository building.
As the police tried to build a case against Oswald, officers were dispatched to question his wife, Marina. They were led by Detective Gus Rhodes.
We drove to the 6th Street address in Irving, address of Ruth Paine, and walked up the walk. And as I approached the door, a voice said, "Come on in, I've been expecting you." Questions that I asked Marina, I said, "Does your husband own a rifle?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you know where it is?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Can you show it to me?" And she said, "Yes." And she motioned for me to follow her. And she directed me into the kitchen part of the house, where she opened a door that goes into a garage. And she pointed out in the garage to a rolled up blanket that was laying out there, and she said, being interpreted by Ruth Paine, "That's his rifle."
And the officer picked up the blanket roll and just hung over his arm. And that was the point at which I felt that he could have been the one that killed the president. And I had this flood of feeling of what they need to know. I'm going to help them know whatever they need to know. We're going to get to the bottom of this. But that was the first I had any inkling that he'd even had a gun.
Why that rifle, that's the fact that you people have been given, but I emphatically deny these charges.
These basic fundamental hygienic rights, like a shower and the clothes.
These people have given me a hearing without legal representation or anything. You shoot the president? I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir. I'm just a cat.